Well, I already introduced myself, but I'll just say that I'm Natalia and I'm running the Global JetBrains for Startups program. So we can actually get into what is this about. So first of all, what is a startup? I feel that you all have an idea of what a startup is, but there's so many definitions of what it actually means that I thought maybe it's good to start with a very easy introduction so we're all on the same page. So the definition I like to use is that it's a new innovative business venture, and usually it either disturbs or it creates new markets. So that's, I would say, like the classic, very broad definition of a startup. And that brings me to the first question. So if all of you could write in the comments, how many startups do you think that are created every year in the world? Any estimates? Nothing can be wrong. So,
Hundreds of thousands,
okay,
maybe.
2,000. Okay, we have 1 million. Oh, so many. Okay, could be tons of thousands, but majority is not successful. You're onto something, Stefan. Okay, 10,000, 20,000, 200,000. Okay, we're getting close to it. I believe so far Sophia was the closest because it's 50 million. So if we would, if you would consider all the startups in the world, it's about 3 per second and 11,000 per hour. But as we said, it's very hard to actually estimate because there's so many of them, and the definition of startups is very broad. So, but this is the data that's usually used when we talk about startups. So while that is a really big number, I believe that was Stefan who wrote exactly what I wanted to say next, and that is that 90% of them fail. And that's a very high rate. But at the same time, there are very many good reasonings why that happens, and we can look into them today. So the first reason why it's most often why startups fail is because there's no market need for the idea. So what I like to always mention is that everybody really focuses on their solution, and they fall in love with their product, they fall in love with their solution, but they don't think enough about the users and they don't think enough about the problem. So that's one of the main reasons. The second reason is running out of cash. And unfortunately, that's also the case. And I hope that Dimitri and the rest of the team will make sure that in the coming lessons, you will have enough knowledge on how to make sure that that does not happen to you. And the third reason is not having the right team. So that's also really, really important to make sure that you're starting the company with the right team. And one interesting fact about that is also that the first 10 people you hire, the culture it creates is going to influence another 1,000 that you're going to have in the company. So it's really important to focus who you're letting into the team and who you're starting the company with. So now this is one of the core parts of the lesson, because we need to know what makes a successful startup. And pretty much it comes down to these three things. So you need to have the right team, just like we mentioned. You need to have the right market opportunity. This means also having the right timing. And the third part is having a strong product. So if you have a good team and a strong product, but there is no market need, well, then you're not going to sell anything. If there is a market opportunity and a good product, but you have a team that cannot work together, then you're going to have a struggle to actually keep the company alive. And lastly, if you have a good team and a market opportunity, but you don't have a strong product, yeah, then you have nothing to sell or nothing to offer. So those are the three key parts for you to remember. And now we can move on to who makes a great founder. And again, I would like you to write in the comments anything that you can think of about a founder, like whatever characteristic comes to your mind is good to write. Hardworking, creative, responsible, hardworking, communicative. Okay. Enduring, yeah. Highly adaptive, can take criticism from many sources, resilient. Okay. Can I also ask you to write anything that you imagine that they, for example, have experience with, or what age they are, maybe the way they look? Yes, critical thinking, self-confidence, very good. Okay, age might be less relevant than experience, though. Yes, very good point. 30 to 35 years old, 16 to 28 for tech. Okay. Okay. Well, we can look deeper into what does the data say. So we have an idea of what makes you a successful startup founder. Most of the data that's coming is based on either the unicorn companies or based on the most successful companies from the US, most likely. So my first thought was like probably a lot of people imagine someone like this, especially when it comes to tech. So it's a lot of young men that are starting their businesses, mostly like in the US, and they all drop out of university and they start their company very young and so on. So the data actually shows the opposite. If we compare all startups in the world compared to the highest growth startups, the average age of a successful founder is actually around 45. So what this shows is that usually if you have certain experience, you are more likely to become successful. The other part is that the younger you are, the more passion there usually is. So there needs to be a balance between how much passion do you have and how much experience do you have. And you can found $1 billion companies whether you are 18 or 68. So that does not make any difference. In terms of something else that I found interesting is if you are an immigrant, you actually have an advantage. So what we see in the data is that 44% of the unicorn founders are not US born, even though the companies are founded in the US. So what it usually shows is that if you come to a new culture, if you come to a new environment, you look at the culture differently, and that allows you to understand what's going on from another lens. And thanks to that, you can come up with new ideas and innovation and therefore have successful business. So that's also interesting. And then if we talk about like the experience in college dropouts, and I believe that was also Stefan who talked that experience is more important. Yes, than age for sure. So what we often see is that they mention these kinds of like elite universities, but that's about 1/3 of the unicorn founders in the world that they've studied at the top 100 ranked universities. Here you can see that it's comparing basically like developed countries versus developing countries and the unicorn founders in these countries. This was like any university, and this is the elite university. So you can see how many actually studied and how many did not study anything at all. And then we have the employment. So they had employment before, and there's not that many of them coming from the big five tech companies or big three consulting companies. But what I find interesting is actually that if you look at the developing countries, there is more of them that were employed by the big five tech companies and the consulting companies than in the other places. And then we have the other part, which is that 80% of founders that create unicorn startups have already created a startup before, or they worked at a startup. And this comes back to the age that we were talking about, because you might think like, okay, so like I can wait until I'm 45 to create a startup and then I'll be super successful. Most of the times that's unlikely, because you need to have also experience with either creating your own startup or working at someone else's startup in order to know how to build a successful startup. So most of the times when you look at this like 90% failure rate, it's scary. And you would even think like, why am I supposed to do this? But the failure rate actually drops the more times you start a startup. So the idea here is also that you need to be okay with failure. You need to be fine with not getting it right the first time. And the other part is, why should you have a co-founder? So maybe you can write in the comments if you think that having a co-founder is a good idea or it's not a good idea, and what you think about it. Okay, so Stefan thinks it could be due to shared responsibility, and both co-founders would contribute with their own resources. Okay, so reducing risk, yes. It's a good idea because I have different ideas, different point of view about the startup, and we can have a productive discussion. Yeah, exactly. You are basically improving your skill set by having multiple people. Very true. Wait a few seconds if there's any other ideas coming in. Also, co-founder probably will support you when you have a burnout. True. Yeah, at least two views on the same problem. Okay, well then let's look at one of the examples of, you can't always work, you need weekends. That's also a very good point. Recently, I heard news about a story where a co-founder killed the founder during an argument. It really made me reflect, and now I have mixed feelings about partnerships and how conflicts can escalate. Wow. Okay, that's an extreme case I've never heard of, but please feel free to share the link because it sounds like a crazy drama story. But I also agree there are also disadvantages to having a co-founder, and there are a lot of advantages, just like you mentioned. So let's look at one of my favorite examples of having co-founders. So have you ever heard of PayPal Mafia? Basically, the idea of PayPal Mafia is that the founders and the first employees of PayPal, it was about 12 people that stayed with it for a longer time, even after it was acquired by eBay, created an insane wealth, and they created some of the most prestigious companies in the world. So they've been engaged in everything from Stripe to YouTube to Tesla and SpaceX, Yelp, whatever you think of, LinkedIn, like all of them were actually linked to each other, and they all know each other. So the interesting part was the fact that you have this kind of network and you have someone to start the business with. It also goes for a long time. So this kind of PayPal Mafia has been like active since about 2002, and they still are kind of like closest friends that work on a lot of projects together. And it's much harder to come in from the outside. So that's one of the interesting examples of the co-founders. And with what you mentioned about what it can have. So if you have a co-founder, it was very much spot on of what you've written. One thing is you have complementary skills. So what investors look into when they want to invest into a startup, they do not usually like to have only one founder. And I know some of my friends that went to investors and they got their interest, but said, okay, if you can come with a co-founder in 24 hours, then we're going to invest in you. And the reason there is you very rarely have all the skills in the world, and very rarely have all the skills you need to build a startup. Usually you might be more business oriented, or you might be really good on the technical side, or on the product side, or on marketing, on whatever other side there is, but you don't have everything. And that's why it's really useful to have someone that helps you cover the areas that you are lacking. The second part is reducing risk and sharing capital, which was in the comments, and it's very true. So yeah, also by Stefan, very true, because yes, we saw the second most often reason of failing a startup is that you run out of cash, and sharing the capital and sharing the risk is a very good way to stay afloat as a startup. And the third part is emotional support and better decision making. So again, it comes back to the skill set and to not being alone in this kind of journey, but hopefully it doesn't end up with killing, as we saw in the last comments. However, I also want to say, because I think there was one other comment about, yeah, you need to work. You always cannot work. You also need some weekends. And when you have a burnout, you need to get support. So those two things also make another interesting point, because indeed you also need to take some time off. And what investors also look into when it comes to investing is if you are two co-founders, if one of you leaves, there's a lower chance of the startup failing, because at least there will be one co-founder left. So that's why there's another reason why they really appreciate if you have someone starting with you. And what I included here with the data, I found it interesting that the founding team is one of the priorities what aspiring founders should look for. It's actually number one according to the Harvard Business School scholars that started a business. And then you can also see that the other ones, for example, team management, is still related to people skills. So that's why I would say, like, focusing on who you start a business with is one of the core decisions for you to make. Okay, so next we're going to look into how to find startup ideas. And once we do that, there's going to be more brainstorming exercises. So I'll talk for a little bit longer, but then there'll be much more space for you to talk. So the question is, can we generate good ideas on demand? Can we just say, like, oh, I want a good idea right now, let's think of one? That's very difficult. It's really tough to come up with ideas that will be really valuable just because you want it in that moment. However, you can spark creativity, and then you can come up with a lot of ideas, and eventually by pivoting and testing a lot, you can find a great idea that can actually work. So one thing that I want to really, really make sure that I say, even though I said it already at the beginning, if we talk about ideas, I think the main thing we need to think about is problem. And you should think about any daily problem that you have, because that's actually the place where you come up with the best ideas. Because if you just focus on the ideas and on some kind of solutions, you'll most likely not solve any problem, and most likely you're not going to have a product market fit, which is crucial. So if we think of some products that are painkillers and they actually solved a real pain and solved a real problem. For example, if we have Uber Eats, there's food delivery, and it removes the pain of having to prepare your own food. There's AI chatbots that remove the pain of going through 10 Google pages. Then we have noise canceling headphones, and they can remove the pain of listening to noisy environments when you need to work or study or anything else. And lastly, I also include the example of online banks, because no one really wants to stand in a queue for hours in a bank. And if you can do it all in an app, it's much more comfortable. So they really focused on the problems and not on the solutions. And that's something we should all focus on. So in terms of how to improve your mindset and how to find startup ideas, we're going to take 3 approaches. So one of them is, I don't know if you guys know Paul Graham, but he's on his new journey, but he used to be the Y Combinator head or the general manager for many, many years. And he has some really great essays on how to start a startup. So if you want to read short essays about about what actually works. He is a great source of them. But one of his ideas is that you should live in the future and then build what's missing. So that's one of the approaches that we're going to try today. The second approach is user story approach, because we need some structure. So we're going to look at a very easy, simple, and straightforward way of how you can approach that. Is a tech agency counted as a startup? Good question. Can you maybe tell me a bit more about what you mean by tech agency? And while you write that or you say it out loud, I'll just mention that the third part is SWOT analysis, which most of you probably know, but it's always good to get that reminded of. AI automation agency using an 8N. To be honest, it comes back for e-commerce. Okay. It comes back into what is the definition of a startup and in what setting are we talking about? Because if we're talking about the usual like investor setting, in that case, we need to look at how scalable is this? Is this disrupting the industry as it is? Is it creating a completely new market that there was not any before? Or is it in a sense of startup as a young business that recently started, but it's utilizing technologies that are already available, and it's not really creating a new market? So to be honest, I don't know enough about the industry to give you a definite answer. I would say it really depends on what sense you want to claim to be a startup. Some companies claim it even after 20 years of being a traditional agency. In that case, I would say it's not really a startup anymore. But if it's still a young company and you're utilizing new technologies, or you're utilizing technologies in a way that they were not used before, or in a market that they were not used before, it can be considered a startup. So it really depends the way you want to look at it. All right. So just a few examples of what I mean by saying live in the future and then build what's missing. One thing you can think of is, for example, what is the normal way of switching the TV? So you can say it by voice, you can use a remote controller, you can actually go to it and press the button, you can have a robot that's going to do it for you. There's a lot of ways that maybe in the future we'll have like a mind tracker and you'll just think about it and it will happen. It's really about the way you can imagine the future and see, okay, how can we get there and what can we do? So it's really about sparking the creativity. Another example is vacuum cleaning. So, there's traditional vacuum cleaners, then you have the robot vacuum cleaners. Now they have also robotic arms, or the newest part is Neo, right? The home robot that can vacuum for you. So it really depends on how you imagine the future and what you can make out of it. And then we have another example, and that's about driving. So it's again about thinking, what do you consider a normal way of driving or being driven, and how can you disrupt that? So I'm a little bit obsessed with this because I was in San Francisco last week and I tried Waymo, and I'm still mesmerized by it. So yeah, you can also think of ways like, okay, maybe we'll not be driving cars anymore, and maybe we'll just be driven. So there's a lot of ways how you can imagine the future, and it's about you of finding the missing piece of what can you do today to be part of that future and be the first one to do that. All right. So now I would like to ask you, if there's anyone who cannot use their audio, you don't need to turn on the cameras, but I'm wondering if there's someone who cannot use their mic, maybe you can write it in the comments, because the next exercise would be actually ideal to do in pairs. So if you cannot do this exercise, please text us into the chat, and I hope that Dimitri will help me create the breakout rooms, because the idea here is I think the best way of testing out any kind of startup ideas, and finding startup ideas is by talking to people and listening. Listening is one of like the most useful ways of finding an idea. So you should listen to your users, and to practice that, we are going to start with a short interview. You can take up to 5 minutes each. And the idea here is to ask the other person, what is the best gift you've ever received? So you can interview the person for 2 minutes, 3 minutes, 5 minutes. It depends on you. Dig as deep as you want to. If anyone cannot maybe use the mic, we can also write it in the comments. But the idea here is that you understand what is the best gift they've ever received, and then why, what made it exceptional. So those are the main things. And you can see if the person can directly say it, or if by listening, you will understand what problem did it solve for the person. So we're going to take in total 10 minutes for that, and another 5 minutes for you to think of, okay, what can you, based on like the insights that you got from the other person, what can you think of as a startup idea? So think of anything that that could be made out of this. I don't know, someone got a chess set, and that was the best chess set in their life. And then you need to think of like, okay, you need to ask enough questions to understand why was that chess set so important. And once you know that, you can see, are you going to recreate the experience? Are you going to create a product out of this? Is there a business concept of, you know, a special like chess set? It really does not matter what it's going to be. It's more about the exercising this kind of thinking. All right. So since everyone's coming back, maybe we can discuss a few ideas that you had. Would anyone be brave and interested enough to say it out loud?
Can you repeat the question, please?
Yes. Can you tell us a bit more? What did you discuss in your breakout room? Was there any idea you found out, or yeah, what direction did you take?
Like we discussed, just like the best gift that we received, like a question that was originally stated. Then we moved on to just discussing our startups ideas and plans for future. Like that's all what we discussed.
Okay, so what were the startup ideas?
So startup ideas is that like my startup idea was my team idea that we are developing like AI driven lawyer assistance service, that when you relocate to another country, you have some app that helps you to fill all the documents, make it like fast, smooth, and less like expensive for you, less stressful.
Yeah, that sounds super useful. And yeah, like the legal tech is also booming right now. So I think that's a really good industry to work on. Okay.
Mhm.
Any other ideas, thoughts that you had? Any other discussions?
Yeah, like we discussed. I don't. I'm not sure that I can pronounce the name of my partner correctly, but we discussed with him his startup idea, but maybe he wants to like say it by himself.
Yeah, of course.
So basically, I have to discuss my idea.
Yeah, yeah. If you're willing to share. If not, it's okay.
No, no, I don't. I don't have a problem. So basically, it's my agency sort of startup. In this, I will be providing AI-based automation services. So nowadays, a big company like Accenture asks for 100K just for a roadmap or audit from big businesses, and they charge huge money like 100K. And it's a big market specifically nowadays where the LLMs are so powerful that they can decide and make a decision. So I have started learning all the AI automation. I'm hoping to get into getting my first client so that I could get a start.
Wow. That sounds very ambitious. I like it. it will be a hard fight with the big companies, but I think it's a really great industry to disrupt because they've had it for over 20 years in a very similar way as they started. So sounds really great. Is there anyone else who had any interesting discussions that wants to share something? You can also share in the comments or out loud.
I'd like to share. We discussed that this best presence, they cover some of our needs. It can be something like physical, for example, as a computer, or it can be just support. For example, to present flowers in some hard situation. And I know a startup which covers this problem with support. Like it's called FlowWow. It's an like worldwide wide delivery service of small presents, which can help you to support someone in different country, like this.
Oh, that's really nice. And yeah, they're definitely onto something. Great. Anton, yeah, what did you discuss?
Yeah, so actually me and my the person who I was working with, we discussed several ideas, but there were more like material presence or something like this. And after this, we just thought about a different kind of thing, about something like the pain is when you don't remember, for example, the movie plot, and or you remember the plot of the movie, but you don't remember the movie itself very much, and you want to somehow make a reminder or look for the actors or something like this. And so we want to create like something like a reverse IMDb service where you can write a back question about the movie or write a plot or something like this, and then you get the movie description and so on. So this may be quite helpful. So yeah.
Oh, yeah, that's a really good idea. I can see that being very useful. Same with music. I feel like a lot of people know some lyrics, but then you always need to find the song. So yeah, really great. So we can continue. So now the other part of looking for an improvement mindset is understanding how do you share ideas. And for that, we're going to look at a very simple framework, which is a user story approach. And that has a very simple formula of, as a certain persona, you want to do a certain action so that you can benefit from it from a certain way. So one thing you need to answer when we're talking about your startup idea is, who's the target audience? What do they want? And why do they want it? That's the very simple value proposition that you can start with. You can have some examples down here, like as a product leader, I want to know all the techniques that I can make best product decisions, right? So then you can talk about like, okay, this is the value that your startup is bringing. If we look at it in another way, and this is my personal favorite, it's a little bit more complicated, but I think it covers even more fully what you need to answer as a startup. So you talk about what product or service you have. Then you talk about the customer segment. So who does it help? So this part is the same as the first one, and about the job that needs to be done. So what do those customers want to solve? And then you talk about the pain. So what is not working right now, and how is your product or service fixing that? And what are they gaining by using that product? So you can always also mention the competitors if you want, but that's an extended version of the value proposition. So this is a simple one. We can also try it out once we look at the next exercise. So another simple part of the how to evaluate ideas is basically doing a very short SWOT analysis. I wonder if there's anyone who hasn't heard of SWOT analysis before. I believe it's almost everywhere, but in simple terms, we just look into what are the strengths of your solution or your product, what are the weaknesses of it, what are the opportunities, and what are the threats. You can do this of existing markets, you can do it of existing companies, you can do it of almost anything, also of your own ideas. So it's a very useful framework and very easily applicable. So that's one way to do it. Maybe shortly we could discuss, like, if we look at, for example, Google search, you can write in the comments or unmute. We can talk first about what do you think are the strengths of Google search?
It has a good UI.
Okay, very good, especially if you compare it to some Asian ones. Information, yes.
It is very direct and answers the question immediately.
Okay, very good, especially, I guess, with the new AI features. The index algorithm they use, okay, yeah. Finding the right results, okay. Very good. Now, when we talk about the weaknesses, what do you think is a weakness of Google search? Nice, yeah. A very good point. Okay.
It can show you some irrelevant but popular data.
Okay. Very good. So also kind of connected to bias. Yeah, they have a bit of an issue with it for sure. I have one more question with that, because I'm seeing this more and more that people use less Google search and they rather search on chatbots. So I'm wondering, do you think that Google search had, now they probably fixed it with like also having AI in the beginning of it, a little bit of an issue with being a little disrupted by the chatbots, since it gives you one answer? And yes, Anton?
Yeah, but isn't it rather a threat here? Because that, for example, Google search may be like interchanged by chatbots here.
Very good. Yes, exactly. So yeah, chatbot would be a threat, but maybe the weakness could still be connected to it. So it could be that it gives you millions of results and you can possibly never go through all of them. So
yeah, actually, I think that a weakness now, like with the era of AI, is that more and more sites are, well, use some LLM generated info or other neural networks generated info. So basically, it shows more and more AI generated content rather than what people create, and it may show you incorrect info due to this.
very good point. Yes, really great point. Great. And maybe a little bit about opportunities. Are there any opportunities that you think Google search can do? And maybe they're not like using it to their fullest at the moment. So maybe there is like a certain market or a certain part of the product that could be improved. Comment browser. Okay. Okay. If there are not any other ideas, if anyone has any other ideas for the threads, please, you can also write them in the comments or unmute. But I guess we already mentioned the one with the chatbots. Okay, if there are no other extra ideas, we can go further. And I want to mention one more thing, because it seems that a lot of you already have certain startup ideas in mind or are thinking of some. And when it comes to getting users, which is something, so last week when I went to TechCrunch Disrupt, it was very interesting because I asked all the startups that I met what is their challenge. And all of them said there is not a problem to get investment. The problem is to get customers. And that's the main thing that most startups struggle with nowadays. Because if you get customers, you don't actually need investment. For example, as JetBrains did it. So it's one way of like bootstrapping yourself up, but there's a lot of wave of like not wanting investment or just having enough investment and not really needing more from the VCs, but more needing something from customers and making them try your product. So one way to look at that is you need to know that getting the first ones, the first users and customers will be very tough. And if you look at the percentage of how it's usually seen, the innovators, it's about 2.5%. So those are the people in this room, and the people that want to think of new ideas, want to try new ideas, are super open to testing things out, but it's a very small percentage of people in the world. Then you have early adopters. Those are the ones you want to be your customers. So they can test out the things early. They usually don't create their new startups, but they adopt things really early on. Then there's early majority. So in this point, you get the most basically out of your startup, because at this point there is still a lot of interest and it's growing, and you can make a lot of business out of this. And once you get into this part, it's a little bit dangerous, because it means someone else is coming with a new idea, and you are losing out on the majority of customers. You're still getting a lot of customers, so it's great if you can use it. But at the same time, you should already focus again on these groups to make sure that there is something new coming from your side and you grow again. And then it's the last part, and that it's great if you can have all 100%, but realistically, there might be a disruption somewhere at this point once it's going down. So it's important to make sure that you're knowing which part of the process you're in. And yeah, so now we can do one more exercise, especially because I see that a lot of you have some ideas for startups. So we're going to do a napkin model. Basically, the napkin model is, if you want to know why it's called napkin, it's because you can write it on a napkin and easily like pitch it to someone, but it has all the important information that we need. So the idea here would be maybe to take 15 minutes. Let's see when you're ready. This will be an individual exercise, so everyone does it on their own. But these are the questions we'll be answering. So you can either think of the startup idea you have in mind, the one that you thought about in the previous exercise, or any other one that comes to your mind. And if you cannot think of one right now, it's okay if you take an existing startup you heard of, just to practice and get the most out of this exercise. So first of all, what is the problem that you're solving? Very clearly, just write down what the problem is. Second, who is the client? Ideally, have a very specific persona in mind, with some archetypes about them. If you can write a few like keywords about them, that's already really good. Then the third question is, how are you going to attract the clients? So ideally think of channels. Of course, you can keep it broad and say like, oh yeah, like I'm going to use social media or something. Ideally, it would be more of like, okay, this is one way how you can attract a lot of clients and have it very well defined. Then the question is, how much will one client pay you? Because you can either go for very low price and do something very cheap, but go for a lot of clients, or you can go for something very expensive and focus on the exclusivity factor of the pricing model, or you can do something in between. Another option is having, a tier pricing, or having like a fluctuant pricing based on what the company, like what's the size of the company or the size of the client. So there's a lot of options. Since this is still a napkin model, you should just write the simplest way that you want your pricing to work and how much would approximately that be. And then if you can think of what would be the cost. So it's important to know, like, are you going to be profitable at the end of the day, right? And there's a lot of extra costs that you don't think of, but at least knowing what would be the major costs you would need to consider for working on this idea, it's already a good start. And where can you find the clients? that's also connected to how are you going to attract them. When we talk about MVP, I mean, I'm talking that we're only having 15 minutes for all these questions. So I know you're not going to go fully deep in, and you should not to follow the model. It's just to understand in a sentence, what is your MVP? How can you do it? And how can you do it in the most minimal way possible? So if we talk about the question number 7, that's very connected to the question number 6. So how can you remove something from MVP? I remember that one of the startups I was working on was a recruitment platform for tech companies, and we had some ideas of how to do like a completely new way of matchmaking. And when I talked about it with our advisor, I was like, okay, so we need to hire a team of developers. We need to like get enough like users. How are we going to start with this? And his idea was like, okay, well, your MVP is going to be open your LinkedIn and start writing to people, to candidates, start writing to companies and say you can hire 5 people for free for them, and just try to do the matchmaking by you being the matchmaker instead of an algorithm. So that was a very different way of what I imagine as an MVP versus how easy you can do the MVP and how you can basically start tomorrow. So the advice here for the MVP is really think of, while your solution might be super techy or super complex, how can you test it in the simplest way possible and the fastest as possible? And the last question, write down the first 3 tasks for delivering the MVP and how can you complete them. So if we're talking about like an idea you have in your mind, let's take this week. You still have a few days in this week. What are the 3 things you could do tomorrow or on Friday to actually do that? And if it's too ambitious and you have too many plans, then maybe next week. But the idea is to really do it soon and have something very actionable. So let's take 15 minutes. It's 6:30, perfect. That makes it easier for us to know when everyone should be back. I already took a minute of your time, but okay, we're gonna come back at 45, and you can take the time to think of all of these things. And then once you have some ideas, you just we just come back and we'll discuss them. And if you have any questions, please feel free to ask. Okay, more or less ready. We have 2 people that are in there. Maybe since Valentin as well, great. Maybe since I hope that I'm cool things as well, perfect. Yeah, whoever, I guess, Prince Loya, if you want to be first. Would you like to
Sure.
a little bit more? You were the first one that was ready, so I
Could
can
you
also
just,
go back to the slide if you want.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So basically, the solution I'm giving is for AI automation. Basically, today a small scale or a big size or a solo entrepreneur has to do a lot of manual stuff which could be automated, but still has to do for the better customer experience. So first of all, if I integrate all this AI automation into this small scale or a solo entrepreneur business, so I could save them a lot of time, which he based on all of this. Problem with my audio?
Yeah, your audio, I believe, is not the best, so we could like hear half of it. Maybe if you could try to move a bit with the mic, maybe it will change. And if not, maybe you can just write a few notes in the comments.
Now it's fine.
Yeah, can you try again? It's better, but it's still a little bit like an echo.
No worries, I will just write it in the chat. Someone else could continue.
Okay, perfect. Thank you so much. Meanwhile, maybe Sophia, you were more or less ready. Would you like to share or?
Yeah, I can share. Yeah. So my startup is for arranging delivery of presents from abroad. So the clients are some ordinary people who have relatives or friends who live abroad. about attracting clients. Something basic like advertising on social medias, and probably in some immigrants chats in early stages. What else? How much one client will pay me? €5 per order, something like this. So, for example, they order in flowers, and it's €5 more expensive than it costs. What else? Costs of my startup. In early stages, it's around 0. Then cost for advertising and app development. Where I can find clients. So as I said, it can be some communities chats, like, for example, I live in Cyprus, and there is a big chat where I can share this idea, and probably it will be taken. And then MVP. I think that I need to create a list of flowers deliveries for several countries, like Cyprus, Netherlands, Germany, Serbia, Armenia. Then I should do unified catalogs, so people can choose options they like. And then I'm still talking about MVP. And I can get orders by direct messages. And steps which I need to do to have this MVP is to make a list of flower deliveries, and then create a easy, simple website, and write to chats.
Okay, great. Sounds amazing. And I really love how you focused on like the distribution. I think you really nailed that part of who needs it, how they need it, and like how you're going to do it. I would challenge your MVP because I believe there's a faster way to test it. And that is, but I'm wondering what you think and what everyone else thinks. So the way you could get it faster, and basically you could have an answer whether there is a product market fit tomorrow, is instead of already doing a list of, like suppliers, you are already part of these chats. So maybe you could just write to the chat without having anything and ask the people like, hey, like anyone who like struggles with this, and either have like a 5-minute, talk with them, or like reach out to anyone that is international living in Cyprus, and ask them, can I call you and can I ask you a few questions about how you like give flowers or gifts to your relatives? And you'll already have like an understanding of what's in the place and how can you do that. I think the difference is that you already know that this works, right? You already know a tool that does it. So that makes it a little different. You already know there is a need for it. But if it was your startup, I think the quicker MVP would be to test it first and only then build. And that's the tricky part, especially I think if you have like a development background, I think you know what is needed to build, but you might not know what is needed to understand if there is a product market need. And I see that business people struggle with finding a way to build things, and engineers struggle with finding a way of testing like the product idea and the market, understanding the market in that extent. So it's just my idea, but yeah, please, if you have any thoughts on this or anyone else has, otherwise we can move on to the next one. Okay, in that case, maybe Valentin, would you like to share a bit more about what you thought of?
Yeah, of course. 1 second. Cool. Okay. So what is the problems that we're solving? We're solving some stressful migration, relocation to another country, that it costs a lot, and that they're like the price of the error in some documents is quite high. So for our clients, there are some people from key countries relocating, for example, to Germany or Cyprus. That's like if we narrow our search, but in general, it can be almost like in future, almost any person relocating to another country. How do we attract clients? Like we can promote our service in some Telegram chats, or maybe try to have a partnership with some company that now relocates their IT specialist to another country. How much one paying client will pay you? So I don't know, maybe from $15 to $100, but I think like that's this price can be a bit lower in the future. How much it will cost? 1 second. Yeah, how much it will cost? So I almost already answered this question. And how much it will cost to attract a client? Like in Telegram chats, it's almost for free. Like you just need to be a part of a community, or just find on some special Telegram channels searchers, and yeah, but maybe some marketing is also possible in future. What is our MVP? Is for example, app on Android and iOS that has some like 10 most popular forms and documents that we need to fill to relocate to Germany and Cyprus. And what can be removed from our MVP? Yeah, and in a previous step, we have an like AI that helps to automate this process and fill the forms. So like in a 7th step, we can remove this AI and do it by our hands. And basically we can launch this app with just getting the photo of the document from the user and just filling it by ourselves. Yeah, and the last question, write down the first 3 tasks. So maybe they're like understand which capabilities should our app have, find some test users, and maybe like interview them, ask what they need, and to build some MVP prototype of the app.
Okay, great. I really like that you both are in the same area, because actually I see that you could do a partnership between your startups. So, the moment that someone does a deal with Valentin, Sophia gets in and offers her service, and the other way around as well. So that's very interesting. I think you really nailed the problem. Like the first part that you said was very on point, very clear. I think like it's clear you thought a lot about it and you have a very clear understanding of what's needed. In terms of attracting the clients, I think Telegram seems like a great way. And as you said, it's very cheap to like actually reach out to people, except advertising that gets very expensive on all social media platforms. But I like both of your ideas of like going into communities. Basically, I think that's like a very similar approach, and it makes a lot of sense for the service that you would be providing. I would also look maybe into like what are your competitors doing, because I would be curious of like how are they getting their customers, and what will be your special value that you will provide that they are not providing. In terms of the MVP, I would give the same feedback as I gave to Sophia. So it really depends on what we want to consider MVP, right? So of course, both of you are right. If you want an MVP that you're going to showcase to customers, if you want an MVP that you're going to, get investors to invest in, depends a lot on what's your like plan. But in this like napkin exercise, I would say the MVP should be something even easier. So even like you could think of something, how can we make it even easier? for me, it's a little harder to think of that with your example of legal tech, because of course you need to have some kind of like legal base for this. But it could be interesting maybe to understand how can this work in like first understanding the users more. And I would say that that maybe is the first step of the MVP that you could start already tomorrow. Like, you know, do a Google form survey of 5 questions and ask different people in different target groups of like communities that you're part of, like, hey, how did you like solve your legal documents in the country? Who did you use? What did you use? What was like the biggest challenge? And then you'll already understand like, okay, maybe like the biggest challenges, you can create the MVP from that and just solve one part of it, whether that's like a specific document or something like that. And you would know like, okay, it's, you know, the first moment that they come into the country, or like after 2 weeks, there is one significant moment that they all struggle with a lot. And then you start with that and you do that very like simply. And only then you start with like 10 documents, because I think like, the more you reduce in this first step and the more actionable you can make it, really like, okay, I can do this tomorrow already, it will like put you into a better spot basically for the future, and you'll understand what's going on much better. So that would be my only advice in terms of your plans. I don't know if you have any thoughts or questions about this, or what would you say about it?
No, I think like it's clear, and yeah, thank you for the feedback.
Yeah, of course. Great. I don't know, is there anyone else who wanted to share with the rest of the group of what they worked on? I believe that Prince Lahia, we were still missing your answer. So but maybe it's a lot of writing. So you can also text me later if you have any questions. Perfect timing. Wow, that is indeed a long text. Okay. Oh wow, that's very ambitious and a very interesting plan. So, I think your business area seems very relevant, and I'm also curious if you have experience in that, because the way you've written the text sounds like you've like been in the either like in the e-commerce industry or you've done something like this before. So that's really good that you understand what they might be struggling with. I would also be very curious to hear how you're going to land the first client in 3 weeks. So if you want to write more about that, I'll be very curious to know that. But I also like your approach of rather having like high value clients, even though it takes maybe like longer to get them, but they stay for longer and they like bring you more. It's definitely like a valuable approach. Other than that, yeah, small to medium-sized commerce businesses, that's very, there's so many of them that it's a very good target group. But there it's also important to get the pricing right. So I would also suggest you to look a lot into how is this going to work. Of course, if you have a freemium model, it's a great way to start, because as soon as you write to someone that you can save them hours of work and they get it for free at first, it's a great way to start to getting clients. But then it's difficult to make them paying customers. So at the same time, I would be careful with using a freemium model, because you can get a lot of users and you get a lot of traction, but then you need to have a very clear plan of how are you going to transform them into paying customers. And you can see that with, for example, I don't know, like Duolingo or some kind of like startups like that started with a freemium and thought like, okay, we can like make it for free completely, but then they realized like, okay, they need to change the business model into advertising model to actually stay alive as a business. So I would also be quite focused on how do you make that work. But otherwise, it sounds like a really great plan. So good luck with that. Yeah, great. Okay, so initially I thought we were going to have a break because it's been another almost hour. But now that we are already here, I think we can wrap it up within 10 to 15 minutes. So I don't think another break will be needed because I'll quickly run through one more topic and maybe it'll be even done fast. So the last part that I wanted to talk to you about is obviously AI. What else could it be? But my point here is we all know that we live in the AI era nowadays, and it's important that you use it to your advantage. So, of course, when you think of your processes, when you think of how is it going to work, you need to consider AI in it. But since we're talking about the startup fundamentals, I want to talk about how do you use AI in your initial plans of your startup. So I wrote, I got a few prompts that could be interesting, talking about different parts of your idea creation. So the first one is about the sparking creativity. And as you all know, I'm pretty sure that like millions of people tried to write, oh, give me 10 startup ideas into some chatbot and thought like, okay, this is terrible. And I cannot start a business on that. So my idea here is to actually do the opposite and ask it for generating something really bad, some very silly idea, something really impractical, something you would not normally think about, because those can actually lead you to something that you'll consider valuable. So what I think is really good by using these chatbots is to understand like, okay, how can I just get some ideas to make yourself think instead of using that for finding an idea. The second one I thought it could be interesting is we mentioned it before when we talk about Google search and like what the weakness of Google search that has a lot of biases. And what I think is that all of us, when we start thinking of a business idea, especially if you're doing it alone, you have a very own understanding of the reality of the world. And it's important to challenge that. And while AI, in my opinion, is very biased as well, it does have like access to a lot of sources, and that can help you uncover some of your biases and assumptions. So the best part of testing your assumptions is to talk to users always. But the other part that is really good is actually using AI and seeing like, okay, what am I having assumptions about? Then the third one is creating detailed customer profiles. So another part that a lot of companies spend a lot of money on is paying for research companies to give them detailed profiles on their customers. But now with like deep research models, you can actually get really good results also by using AI. So I would suggest always start by understanding your customer yourself. But once you need to know certain details, it can be very useful to enlarge what you are thinking about with what it can provide you with. And last part is you can use it for customer mapping. So I would suggest you understand your customer, you understand probably what they're going through, but the customer journey can be quite complex and you might miss some points that can be important. So I would also suggest you to use AI to understand that better. But of course, I believe I wrote it here, yes, it's always better to check with real users and not only AI. So in my opinion, it can help you a lot with so many things, but be careful about not skipping the most crucial part, and that's talking to your users. And if you ever decide to do a master's in entrepreneurship, I can tell you it's like 50% of basically talking to users and stopping people on the street to understand what are their values. And you always need to talk to the user first. So I would say that's like the most important thing to remember. I wrote a couple other things that are important. So one thing I wanted to mention is you can do it. We looked a lot today into like who is a successful founder. And what we found out that there is no like simple formula, like oh, you need to work in a big tech company, you need to have this kind of background. Not at all. It really can be anyone, and it can be you to create a really successful startup. So you can easily do it. But you need to have a good team, a good market opportunity, and a strong product. So those are the three things that are important. I believe you're going to test it out much more in the coming sessions. Then my favorite one is you should obsess over a problem. So always look at the problem and don't look at the solutions. Like even if you spend majority of the time of your developing of a startup idea talking about the everyday problems you feel, what people struggle with, it's really important to understand the problem the most. Then we have the value proposition. So a very simple sentence of how you would describe your startup, and that is always about the value. And then we have all the frameworks that we looked at. I would say remember the framework, but don't use them blindly, because many of them are just important to understand how things work, but they don't always apply 100%. So use them in your own ways, how it works for you. And lastly, we have AI. So yeah, use it, but be careful about not skipping the main part, and that's talking to customers and users. So that's it. I have some minutes if you want to talk about any questions you might have, but you can also like write me on LinkedIn, and I'll be happy to answer any questions you might have. So that's also an option. Is there anyone who has any questions now? That's a good
Yes, I have a
question.
question
Maybe
about,
Dimitri.
yeah.
I just saw it. Yes, Dimitri, is there any Telegram chat where, or I don't know if you have like a Slack channel or whatever, what the way it works?
No, we won't have a specific chat for this semester open lectures, but if you will qualify for the next semester, where we will develop full projects from the idea, from small prototype to the full scale MVP and pitch to the investors, this way, yeah, we will invite you to the chat with all the other participants. But currently we are focusing on an open lectures, and you will be notified of the new lectures by email. But you can, if you want to connect with someone specific, you can ask for their details here. I think you can write Natalia in LinkedIn. She will answer you.
Okay,
Yes,
and what is
yes,
Natalia's LinkedIn?
Yeah, of course. I'm gonna send it right here. So if you have any questions, you can just write me. I wish that I would say that I respond as fast to email as I do on LinkedIn, but I don't. So that's why I think LinkedIn is faster. And if you have a quick question, it's easier to have a back and forth than emailing. So right there, so we can just connect, and you can just write me about anything.
Okay, thank you.
Of course. Perfect. If there are no other questions, then that's it.
Yeah,
So,
I would just wanna make a little note about our following lecture. So next week we will meet once again at the same time by the same link, by the way, so you can save the link. Next lecture will be about biotech industry. Artem Muratov, he's a lead of the life science in Nebius, will give the lecture on the biotech industry. You can maybe research something by yourself about the industry to be in a context, but if you want, it's not a problem. And thank you for attending. We will share a recording of this lecture on the followings by email as well. Yes, Sophia? Sophia?
I just wanted to ask if you know some good sources of kind of inspiration of like how people discover some problem and come up with the idea of startup or solving this problem.
Yes, definitely. I can send you some links already here, so you'll have something to open. Yeah.
Thanks.
Also, there are some news platforms like TechCrunch. There are places like Product Hunt and Reddit where you can find the communities for the specific area, specific niche you're interested at. And for example, in Reddit, you can search for a community on a specific topic and then see their pain points in here. So yeah, there are many different sources. I think Natalia could send you something, some more information in LinkedIn if you'll ask her. And yeah, check some sources like Product Hunt, TechCrunch. They should be useful.
Yeah, especially like what you said, Dimitri, with TechCrunch, Startup Grind, and these ones, they have a lot of, like, if you're in EU, there's EU startups. They write about all the startups that are booming right now, and so that's very interesting to check for sure to see like what's happening in the industry. I also wrote you 3 other sources. One is like more about the articles, but he has very like philosophical ways of looking at startups, but he has some really good like advice that's also in the videos. So there's something called Startup School by Y Combinator, and that's really great to take a look at. Also because, for example, if you're looking for a co-founder, they have like a function for it and things like that, but they also have some really great videos with all kinds of founders. So that can be useful if you want to watch something about a specific topic. And since I believe many of you have a technical background, I would say Indie Hackers is also a really cool platform. They have a bit of everything, but they have a big community. So there's also a forum, but it's mainly made for like technical founders. So you can see what are people developing, what is like the newest going on, and what they're looking for, what they struggle with, and so on. But if you have any other questions about some sources, you can let me or Dimitri know, and we'll answer.
Okay, I have also one question about you, Natalia. You said that you worked with like 55,000 startups in 7 years. Like, how is it even possible to, touch this amount of startups?
Yes, so I'm very lucky to be in a place where I run the Global Startups program. So it really depends on the way that we say like touch so many startups. So back in my position at Microsoft, I actually had a much more commercial role. Although now my role is becoming more and more commercial as well. But there I had to have one-on-one conversations with every startup that was our customer. So I was responsible for 2 regions, Denmark and Iceland. And I had a one-on-one conversation with every startup that was using Microsoft for Startups. So there was a very one-on-one approach. The way that I work now, because at JetBrains we have over 55,000 startups just here. We have certain startups that we have a one-on-one conversations with, but the other ones it's more that they are using our tools, and we have different like webinars, we have different events, we have meetups with investors, with incubators, with the corporates, but that is more on a large scale basis. So it's more that I have a lot of like far away communication with them, but we have a team of people, so we have about 8 people on our team that handle the one-on-one conversations, but that's also mainly via emails. But we have like communication with all of them. So that's the way that I've been in touch with so many. And also, for example, so last year, for example, I've been to over 35 startup events. So almost one every week or every second week, and that there I speak with hundreds. For example, next week I'm going to Slush, or like in a week, and that last year I've connected with and talked to about 700 startups in 2 days. So since we have these kinds of booths, it's insane. Like I have to admit, it's a little bit too crazy when I come back from these events, because you realize like, wow, okay, this is a lot of people, and there's so many of them doing so many different things. But yeah, it's a lot. So I think I write 55,000 because that's like how many I've been in touch with, but actually speaking to directly, it's some thousands, but I don't have the precise number of how many. But you can imagine from what I just described. And one thing I can say, actually, yeah, or if you have a question.
Okay, so I have a question. Like, can you name some startups that like were in a partnership with JetBrains or Microsoft, and they were like successful or somehow like did something useful? I mean, to understand the track and like scale of these kind of projects.
Yeah, of course. So I actually I was struggling a lot when I started JetBrains because we didn't have this kind of data, but luckily now I have the data, so I'm very grateful to actually have an answer for this. And for example, Canva started with our startup program by having a couple of developers, and now they have thousands of employees. Or if you think of huge companies like Wolt or Bolt, or these kinds of companies, they all started with our JetBrains startup program, and now they're really, really big. So in terms of my traction, it's a little more difficult because I've been in this current role for about 2.5 years, and there are companies that have between 200 to 500 million in investment that I've been in touch with, but they're not that known. They're, for example, in the automotive industry, in the health tech industry, and so on. So I would say they're big startups, and they're on the track to become huge. But the ones that made it to the level that regular people, like a lot of people, know about it, they joined our program about 8 years ago or 7 years ago at least. So those are the companies that I mentioned. Yeah.
And what is the point for JetBrains and Microsoft to build so many startups around? Like, do they have some shares in these companies, or like what's the profit for them?
Depends. Some of them they do. There are different approaches to this corporate startup programs. So you can have a more of an NGO kind of approach. So, for example, what NVIDIA does is very much focused on just providing resources to startups without really promoting anything or taking any share of that. You can have a very commercial approach as Microsoft, Amazon, Google, and they have an approach in a way that they want you to use their products, and they will give you things for free or for cheaper at the beginning in order to keep you as a customer for longer, because of the migration cost is really high, and a lot of larger companies will not easily migrate their cloud services. They prefer to do it this way and get a lot of startups at the young stage, and then make sure that they are their customers when they grow up. And there are, of course, also corporate venture funds. So if you search for CVC, there's a lot of them. And they basically invest into startups because eventually they want to acquire them or they want to merge them into their company. So those are different kind of wings of how can you have an approach to startups from corporates.
Okay, thank you for the answer.
Yeah. Of course. If you would have any other question about it, you can just let me know. And I wanted to say one thing about going to these kinds of startup events, because you asked about the startups I've met. I would also say one thing I realized from these events, and if I can give an advice to anyone, if you want to start your own startup, it's really useful to be connected. There are a lot of online chats. There's a lot of in-person events all over the world, like in Cyprus, in Amsterdam, in Berlin, wherever you go, in London, it's insane. So there's so much that you can join, and it really helps you understand what's going on in the startups market or industry, but at the same time have connections with incubators, with investors, and so on. So if I could give one tip, then it's be good at networking. It helps to being a good founder as well.